Hey, what's going on everybody? In this video, we are going to go through how to install a Zoneminder server. Specifically, we're going to be using Ubuntu Linux version 8.04, or 18.04, sorry. This was going to be in the same video as the Wyze camera setup, but I decided to split it out into part 1 and part 2. So if you do have Wyze cameras and you're wanting to get those configured with RTSP to work with something like Zoneminder, check out that video. But anyways, let's go ahead and start talking about how to set up a Zoneminder server. Now, to set up Zoneminder, we are going to need a Linux installation. Personally, I use Ubuntu, so let's just go to google.com. If you're unfamiliar with downloading Linux, we're just going to Google Ubuntu download, go to download Ubuntu desktop, except for desktop's not really the version we're going to be running. And now that we're on Ubuntu's website, I'm just going to go to the download tab, and Ubuntu server, not Ubuntu desktop. And we're going to do option 2, manual server installation. And we're going to scroll down to alternative downloads. Now what I want is Ubuntu server 18.04 long-term support. So let's go ahead and click that. And it is now downloading. So for you and your equipment, what you can do is just take a USB drive and flash this Ubuntu operating system to the flash drive using something like Rufus, which if we just go to Google, download Rufus create bootable USB drives, we can get a portable version of it. So Rufus 3.17 portable. If we download that, when we open it, it's just going to give us a thing like this. We pick the device we want, which would be your SD card. It would show up in this list. Pick the disk image, which is the file that we just downloaded for Ubuntu, and then hit start, and that'll get your USB drive ready for Ubuntu. And then you would just put it into your spare computer or whatever, and install it as you would Linux on anything else. Now, I think it goes without saying, if you are not wanting to use the Linux version or Zoneminder with this, you can pretty much just stop watching this video, because this is just one of the many NVR solutions that you can set up. The directions that I'm going to be going into is specific to this one. So if you're wanting something like Blue Iris, I should be making a video on that as well. But if you're doing one of the other ones, just find a guide that is related to the software that you are going with. Now, to simulate my hardware that I have lying around, I'm just going to be using VirtualBox, which is a virtual machine hypervisor. You can also run your home security system as a virtual machine, either on a real server or like this on VirtualBox on your desktop. I probably wouldn't, because that means you have to leave your desktop running 24/7, and those resources for Zoneminder are going to be tied up, taking away from your desktop resources. But just saying, the option is there. So I already have a Zoneminder machine, but I am not going to be using that. I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to do Zoneminder 2. We will be using type Linux and Ubuntu. We'll give it 1,000 megabytes of RAM. This will eat up pretty much as much RAM as you throw at it, but 1 gig is okay for our purposes. We're going to create a virtual hard drive. One note, if you are for some reason going to be using VirtualBox for your actual security system, make the virtual hard drive way bigger, or attach the external drive like I was talking about earlier. But we'll go ahead and create that with 10 gigabytes just to get this off the ground. And the first thing we're going to want to do is go into our settings, go to network, and change the network adapter from NAT to bridged adapter so that it's actually on our home network and accessible by all our devices and cameras. So we'll go ahead and click OK, and then start. Now, while this is booting, let's go ahead and go to the guide that we will be using, which is straight from the Zoneminder documentation. And you can see here for the installation guide, we have a whole bunch of different tutorials for different operating systems. So while I'm using Ubuntu 18.04, you can also use Debian, Debian Stretch, Red Hat. Apparently you can use Windows 10 with using whatever WSL is. I don't know what that is, and I've never done it, so I can't tell you about it. But I went with Ubuntu 18.04 because I'm used to Ubuntu, and when I tried to do it with 16.04, for some reason it kept telling me that the Zoneminder installation package didn't exist. So don't know what the issue was there. 18.04 is just the one that worked for me, so that's the one that I'm going with. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that guide, and it's going to go through all the steps needed to get Zoneminder up and running. Now, fair warning, this is a pretty lengthy installation. It's not just a sudo apt install Zoneminder. There's some preparation that needs to be done prior. Now I'm going to go back to my VirtualBox VM, and I'm just going to select my Linux installation media. And I'm going to go through all of the boring setup of actually installing Linux on this VirtualBox. All right, and now I have installed Ubuntu on this virtual machine. I have given my username the name of just Ubuntu and our host name as Zoneminder. So let's go ahead and start this guide, which begins with sudo apt-get install taskcell. It's going to want the root password, put that in, agree to the additional space it's going to use, and then do sudo taskcell, which is what we just installed, install lamp-server. And we could have actually selected this during Ubuntu setup, but I'm just going to follow the guide as it is. Basically what this is doing is it's just installing Apache, MySQL, and PHP to the server to have all of the requirements to be a LAMP server, and then we're going to configure those individual services for Zoneminder. And this warning is just that certain services are going to be restarted. It can restart those services without asking because this machine's doing nothing else. And once that's done, we'll just have our prompt back at the bottom. And moving on with the guide, we're just going to do sudo-i. All this does is change our working user to root, so we don't have to keep typing in sudo and possibly entering the root password later. And from here, we are going to add the repository, which contains our Zoneminder installation package. To do that, it's just add-apt-repository space ppa :i conner /zoneminder -1.34. And it's going to give us some kind of warning, as well as instructions to make a donation for the package maintainer, which, as always, is recommended. The only reason that this is around is because the actual official Zoneminder repository I don't think is maintained currently, so this good person was kind enough to devote his time to getting this to work for everybody on older releases of Linux. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter to add the repository, and then we're going to do the complete standard new Linux installation commands, and that is apt-get update to update all of our repositories, and then we're going to do an apt-get upgrade to upgrade all of our packages. We'll go ahead and click yes, wait for it to do its thing. Once that's done, roughly 10 minutes later, we'll go ahead and do the last command of apt-get dist-upgrade for distribution upgrade. Select yes, and again, wait for it to do its thing. And after all of those updates and upgrades are done, we can move into step 3 of the guide, which is to configure MySQL. And if I wasn't using VirtualBox, I would just copy and paste these commands in there, but I'm going to have to type them in manually. So the first one is rm for remove, basically the same thing as delete in Windows. And we're going to remove the etc mysql my.cnf for my configuration file. And the note is that it removes the current symbolic link, which is apparently necessary for it to function. And after we've removed that one, we are going to copy etc mysql.conf.d mysqld.cnf, and we're going to copy that to etc mysql my.cnf. So basically, we're just removing the old one and replacing it with this one, which is located elsewhere. And then now we have to edit the MySQL settings. So to do that, we're going to do nano etc mysql my.cnf, which is the file we just moved, and go down until we find the mysqld section, which is not very far. It's just right here, mysqld_safe. No, we're just kidding, not that one, the one under it, which is just mysqld. And it says basic settings. We've got user, all these other ones. What the guide wants us to do is just simply add a line here under skip external locking, which is called SQL_mode, and then equals no_engine_substitution. Once we've added that in, we can do a Control X, type in Y to save, and enter to overwrite the current file. And once that's done, we just need to restart MySQL. So systemctl restart MySQL. And once that restart has happened, we can go ahead and do apt-get install Zoneminder. And it's going to say that 693 megabytes will be used by Zoneminder. Yes, we want to install it. And here we are again, waiting for it to do its thing. And once the Zoneminder installation is finished, which for me took roughly 5 minutes, we can go ahead and configure the Zoneminder database. So let's go ahead and do mysql-u root-p > symbol. Then we're going to do user share zoneminder db zm_create.sql. And it kicks back saying there is no such file or directory, and that is because I fat-fingered Zoneminder. Looks like I typed it in as Zoneminder. And we'll go ahead and enter password. I'm just going to use password 1234, and then we'll put in the command mysql-u root-p-e, and then parentheses grant lock tables space alter space drop, comma alter comma drop comma select comma insert comma update comma delete comma create comma index comma alter routine comma create routine comma trigger comma execute on ZM period wildcard 2 single parenthesis ZM user single parenthesis at local host identified by single parenthesis ZM pass single parenthesis semicolon parenthesis. Enter the password 1234, and prepare to set the permissions. Now, hopefully you're setting your computer up where you don't have to actually manually type all this in. I just kind of end up doing that mainly because I'm lazy, but you could just SSH into this, enable SSH on Ubuntu, SSH into it, use PuTTY from a different computer, and you can just copy and paste all these commands in without having to worry about mistyping anything. Or if you installed a desktop version of Ubuntu, you could probably just browse to the guide and copy and paste straight into the terminal. Just letting you know that you do have other options. But for now, let's change the permissions on these folders. So chmod 740 for etc zm zm.conf. And then we're going to change the owner with chown root www-data for etc zm zm.conf again. And we're also going to change the owner recursively for www-data www-data user share Zoneminder. And it cannot access it because I actually spelled out user instead of just USR. So there we go. And after we've set the permissions, now we got to configure Apache. So a2en mod CGI. It's probably going to say that all of these are already enabled. Last time I did this, it said that for all of them, but we're going to do all of them anyway. Now, at this point, it says to activate the configuration, reload Apache 2. We're not going to do that yet. We still have some commands to put in, which is a2en mod expires and a2en mod headers. Now we can do systemctl enable Zoneminder, which just enables the Zoneminder system service. And then we're going to start that service. So systemctl start Zoneminder. Now at this point, Zoneminder should be running, but the next thing is to edit our time zone. And that is just to have the times correct on our actual security cameras, which as you can imagine is very important. So we're going to do a nano etc php 7.2 Apache 2 php.ini. And we're going to hit Control W to search this document for date.timezone, which is right here. And we're going to enter whatever time zone it is that we are in right here. And it has to be in a very specific format. And there is a link. Actually, I'll just bring it over here. There's a link to the different time zone formats right here in the guide. If we click on that, we can kind of select where we're at. For me, I'm in America. And this is a list of all of the American time zones. Now for me, I know that I am the Chicago time zone, so I'm just going to look through the list for Chicago, America/Chicago. That is exactly what I need to type in as the time zone. So here in the INI file, we're going to remove the semicolon from the beginning of this line so that we enable this line to actually work. And then after the equal sign, we're going to do a space and then America/Chicago for me, or whatever you have. And at this point, we can do a Control X, hit Y to save it, and enter to overwrite. Now, at this point, we can do the systemctl reload Apache 2, and theoretically, we should be good to go. All we got to do is browse to our Zoneminder installation using a web browser. Now, to get the IP, I'm just going to do an IP space A, see what IP it is I'm going to be browsing to. Right here for the second interface, looks like 13.121 is our Zoneminder server. So let's bring our web browser back up, open a new tab, and go to http 10.88.13.121/ZM. And here is our Zoneminder privacy policy. Scroll down to the bottom, just hit apply. Oh, well, apparently I declined it, and apparently that didn't matter. But anyways, we are now in Zoneminder. Zoneminder appears to be running. We can browse through. all of our different menus. But to add a camera, we're going to go to console and this big blue add button, and that will pop up our camera edition window. Now, pretty much all of this we're just going to leave the same. The one thing that you might be concerned with, at least on this general menu, is the function. There are multiple functions in Zoneminder: none, monitor, modect, record, mocord, or nodect. And you might be like, well, I know what two of those are, record and monitor. Basically, monitor is the cameras will be on, you can view them in real time, but no recording is going to happen, no alerts are going to be flagged. The only way you can really see what's going on is if you are on that camera at that specific time. So it does what it says, monitor. Now, modect means motion detection, and it's not entirely self-explanatory. Motion detection just means it's going to record while it's detecting motion for a few seconds before and a few seconds after. Well, actually a few seconds after, not before. But you're only going to get clips while motion is going on. If there's no motion happening on your feed, it's not going to be recording. Record is just going to record everything consistently all the time. Your clips are going to be hours long, and you have to manually parse through them to see if anything happened. Mocord is the same thing as record, except for it's going to combine it with motion detection. So while it's recording everything all the time continuously, it's going to highlight the sections that have motion in them. So you will still have this crazy long, like 8-hour clip, but there will be certain sections designated that show you where the motion is happening. So you don't have to go through and just like look for what happened. It'll kind of be like, hey, there was some motion here. Hey, you might want to look here, motion. It'll automatically make like clips for where motion was happening. Now, nodect is one that you're probably never going to use. The explanation I saw for that was that it's almost like monitor in a sense, but it's made to work with like third-party triggers. So if there's some other kind of system you have that can issue a third-party trigger to Zoneminder, then it'll start recording when it sees that trigger. But that's kind of a special use case. So I'm going to leave this on mocord because I want it recording all the time and flagging whatever motion it sees. And to actually set up the camera, let's go over to the source tab. And source path is where we're going to input those links that we made a note of in Notepad. So for our first camera, we're just going to copy this one, paste it into the path. We're going to change the method from TCP to UDP, and then we're going to set a capture resolution. And these Wyze cameras, I believe, do 1920 by 1080, but you can select a different resolution if you wish. There is a whole drop down for them. Just remember, the higher the resolution, the more data is going to be used. And if you have a different area you want to store a certain camera at, you can drop this down. This requires you already have configured additional storage for the server, which I will get to in just a second. But at this point, the camera is ready to be added. We're just going to hit save. And right here, it says monitor 1. That's just the default name it gets. It's using mocord, and it's not capturing at the moment. But if we refresh the page, we can see that monitor 1 is now capturing. And if we click on that monitor 1 link, we can see the output from monitor 1. And if we scroll down, we have, doesn't look like any options, but some information. So let's go ahead and add our second camera. So add monitor 2. We're also going to use function of mocord, and we're going to paste in our second source, which is the link for our version 3 camera. Source path, paste, method UDP, and we're going to give that the resolution again, 1920 by 1080. Save. Give it a couple seconds of saying not capturing, and then we'll refresh the page and see if we get a feed. And it looks like that our version 3 is not working. So let's go back into, actually let's just click on monitor 2. Yep, says it's not capturing. Let's go back into the settings for the source just by clicking on the IP address. And let's take a look, just kind of compare it to the other one, which that looks the same. It is enabled. If we go to source, our RTSP link, yep, netman test1234 at 13.107 live. All right, and there it goes. Apparently all I had to do was restart the camera from within the Wyze app. It just wasn't wanting to connect for whatever reason. So let's go ahead, click on monitor 2. Oh, there's a car. All right. So both of our cameras are now working. And we can go do some other stuff like a montage. I believe this is a montage of, well, I thought it was a montage of the different clips, but I guess it's just both of those. We can change this to actually fit both on one screen here. And one other note, it looks like our version 3 has the Wyze logo and timestamps on it. That is actually something that you can turn off. At least it was on the version 2s. Let's bring our phone back up and head to our version 3 camera, go to the settings, and we should see here. Maybe it's under advanced settings. Yep, there it is. Show timestamp. Let's go ahead. We could probably keep that on there if we want to. It doesn't look like Zoneminder is putting a timestamp on it. I know Blue Iris does by default, but we go ahead and turn that off, as well as the Wyze logo. And back out of there, then we shouldn't have those on our screen anymore. Now, our security system is pretty well set up at this point. One more thing that I'm going to show you is just how to set up the actual detection zones. And if we go back to our console, over to the far right, we see a little link for zones, and there's zone 1 for each camera. If we click on that, then that'll give us our overlay. And you can see the entire screen has a red tinge to it. And what we want to do is just add a new zone. That's going to open another window. And what we can do is we can put in the X and Y coordinates of each point for the zone that we want to make. Or if you are very careful, you can mouse over the points on the screen and drag them around. Now, anything in red is going to be where the camera is looking for motion. So if we drag it like that, any kind of motion outside of this red area is not going to flag an event or a clip or anything like that. And we'll go ahead and save that. Oh, we have to specify the alarm. When I set this up, I usually just choose a preset of fast, medium sensitivity. You're kind of just going to have to play around with this. Pick what's best for you. See which settings kind of flags the least false positives, basically, because you can get very high sensitivity where like a leaf blowing around outside is going to set off your motion alarm, and you don't really want to be sifting through hundreds of clips of leaves blowing around. You want it to only pick up the motion that is relevant. But then you also don't want it so low that if somebody walks by your camera, it doesn't pick it up as motion. So you kind of have to just play around with these. Fast, medium sensitivity is what I usually go with, and then change it later if there's issues. So we'll go ahead and save that and close out of there. And that is pretty much everything to getting your home surveillance system off the ground and running using Wyze cameras and Zoneminder. Like I said, there are many more NVR softwares available out there. Like I said, I use Blue Iris personally, but Zoneminder is one of those that's just free, and it seems to do, at least for what I use my surveillance for, it seems to do everything. What you can do is plug in a external hard drive, and as long as you can get it recognized by Linux, then you can go into the options, storage, and set it up here, and you can tell Zoneminder to record your footage to that storage location instead of the local storage. So hopefully you learned something. Hopefully this gets you off the ground with home security without breaking the bank, hopefully. Like I said in the part 1 of this 2-part series, this total setup costs probably around $150, but that's assuming that you already have a PC lying around. You're going to use a free NVR software, and you already have some sort of storage solution lying around, be it a USB drive or an external hard drive. If you are starting from absolutely nothing, this might not be the cost or most cost-effective way to go. You might want to get one of those full-blown, like $400 NVR systems, or just go with the Wyze cameras and the Wyze app. But if you have some extra hardware laying around and you feel like doing something like this, it's not a bad way to go. So leave me some comments if you have any issues with it. There are a ton of variables. There are a ton of things that can go wrong between setting Zoneminder up on Linux and also with the cameras and the apps. There's a lot of places that things can mess up in this. And if you do have an issue, leave it in the comments. I'll try to answer it. But if it's something that I really have no idea what the issue is, then I'll just tell you I have no idea what's going on with it. But hopefully you can try and figure it out a little bit armed with the knowledge from these videos. And as always, happy networking.